Greetings, traveller. Property is violence. That's a bold statement right off the bat, but let me explain. Property is violence because it requires an individual or group of individuals to monopolise violence over it to be a legitimate claim. What this means is that you don't own your own house, or anything for that matter, since you don't have a monopoly on force over anything you, quote, own. Your house, car, computer, toothbrush, phone, whatever, can be taken with a greater amount of force than what you can exert. In a statist society, the owner of everything is the government, as they have the last say in if you can use it or not. When you buy land, you aren't buying the land as your property. What you're really doing is buying the rights for the government to allow you to use that land. And the government can take this away whenever they want through a process known as compulsory purchase, or eminent domain if you're American. You may have an M16, but if the government has tanks as an elite special forces, you stand no chance against their demands of taxation and their force if they choose to take your land away from you. This is important, as when we look at property on a much larger scale, the same phenomenon of violence always comes back to every property claim. If this violence can be exerted, then the claim is legitimate. If it can't, then it is illegitimate. I can say that I own the entire Amazon rainforest. Me saying that doesn't make it true, and in this case it isn't, as I can't monopolize the force over the region, so my claim is illegitimate. Owning my house, however, is something I can legitimately claim in a stateless society, as I can monopolize force over the house and defend it from invaders who aren't welcome on my land. Whilst this property claim is legitimate, it is still a claim backed up by violence, such as getting shot if you try and take my house. You aggressed on me, and therefore me using force to defend myself and my way of living is purely in my self-interest and justified. Any other claims of property which inhibit my way of life as an individual are also forms of aggression. If a business tries to privatize a part of the commons which everyone in the community requires to live, such as a fresh water supply, then it is in the self-interest of me and all the other members of the community to band together as a militia to defend our lifestyle from what we perceive as a form of aggression. If we, the collective, have more power than that business which is trying to privatize that fresh water supply, then their claim is illegitimate, and the water supply remains part of the commons. In this manner, whether you like it or not, might does indeed make right. However, might doesn't have to come from one individual. It can come from a group where more of the members have the same self-interest, such as defending their fresh water from oil pipelines or fracking, as in what happened at the Dakota Access Pipeline protests in North Dakota, or protecting other people they rely upon for services they themselves cannot provide for themselves. People with similar self-interest will stick together to maximise their own benefits, whilst at the same time giving the others around them an incentive to stick around also. This concept is known as the Union of Egoists, and it is the epitome of a voluntary stateless society. So, you may be asking, what about personal and private property? Well, with personal property, that is anything you can personally defend. Actually, let's not make that distinction. There is your property and not your property. If you cannot defend it yourself, then it isn't yours. But Journey, what about my factory which I own? The answer to that in any society is that you don't own it. In today's society, the government owns it, and in a stateless society it depends, but in neither case will you own it. Either one, it becomes a cooperative with the workers owning it collectively and running it democratically, and if you don't want that, then the other option is to hire private security to express your ownership over it. However, even in this scenario, you still don't own it. The private security owns it. They are the agents which exert the force needed to claim the property, and whenever it benefits them more than working with you, they can stab you in your back and take your shit. And who or what is going to stop them? If you own a massive $50 million mansion, then those private security firms made up of individuals, each with their own self-interest, will look to secure some of that pie for themselves. And when your military is against you, you've got no power except for what you can personally exert, which is not going to be as much as the private security can, and therefore your ownership over the mansion has gone. It's not your mansion anymore, and in this manner, one person's property is limited to their own ability to control and defend land. And this is the absolute barriers of what your private property is, and what it isn't. But Journey, what about private courts? Private courts won't do anything, because like the security force, the courts are made up by individuals, each with their own wants and desires. They could do their job, but what if the corrupt path is more lucrative than the moral path? What if the most powerful organisations could give them more of an income than through legitimate means? They now have an incentive to provide for the group which keeps the money rolling in, and punish their competitors unfairly to increase the market share of this company even more, and essentially creating a monopoly where no other companies are able to enter. This is a mutually beneficial relationship between the court and the company. Okay, I want to push this further. Let's give some ground to those who believe private courts are incorruptible for whatever reason. What effect would the private court even have in a voluntary society? Let's say I was that business owner and my actions were harming hundreds of thousands of people because I was dumping toxic waste in the river to dispose of it cheaply. What if I just went back to what I was doing before and didn't even give the private court a wink? Would the court send armed mercenaries to kill me? If so, couldn't they do that to anyone? And to be a legitimate power, wouldn't they have to be able to overpower the largest private security agencies in the region? Wouldn't they have to have a monopoly on force over a region to prevent violations of the NAP? And if they have a monopoly on force over a region, what's able to stop them from saying everyone living under their jurisdiction now has to pay money to them every month or be incarcerated? We've come full circle here. Those in power make the rules for the rest of us, and those in power have no rules to follow. These elite terrorists could kill you for whatever reason they want, and you better be ready to defend yourself. There's a reason why governments take your guns away. If you are unable to resist when the day comes, you are going to fall in line and fake crying when your dictator leader dies under the threat of internal gulag, not just for you, but also your parents and your children. There's a reason only states are able to own nukes, because if a community did, then governments could do nothing to them without the threat of annihilation. Those who decide the rules keep you as their slaves. Is there any wonder why the most authoritarian regimes in the world are the ones who confiscate civilian firearms to give themselves an even stronger legitimacy in owning you? That if you try to leave you get gunned down in cold blood? This may not be the case in the West, but the future could be exactly this. When governments gain technology to control your mind and you refuse to be chipped by the government, you are a threat to their dogma, and you are the true threat which needs to be immediately disposed of. This is why every government that exists is a threat to humanity, culture and community. The self-interests of these international tyrants is to increase their power, however they might do it. How close are we, and will we be in the future to the Orwellian nightmare of Oceania? They already spy on us, they watch us as we type, and our governments murder thousands of innocent people with robots of death. Governments are known to detain anybody they please, under the premise that they are mentally ill with no evidence whatsoever, and we are all put through over 10 years of pure obedience training designed to masquerade as education. And unlike with the outrage over the first two, outrage over the psychiatric abuse and industrial schooling remains with a deafening silence. And if you refuse to go to school, you are a truant, and you are taken away from your loving family. If you are committed involuntarily to a mental institution, they will use force to lock you up against your will. You will have less rights than a convicted criminal. Whatever medication is prescribed to you, you will be forced to take in a primitive form of mind control. Now repeat after me. I am free. Yeah, you are free. You are free to do whatever those with the monopoly on force want you to do. You are free to march in line, and you are free to salute the dear leader. You are free, sir. Don't argue against it. Without government, you wouldn't be free, because government gives you your rights. This is the lie we are all told. And all of these aren't limited just to the countries we like to laugh at like North Korea. these very much hit home for us all in Western nations also. Thanks for watching this video. This was part 1 of a series about my philosophy of self-interest. And the next video will be coming out in hopefully a week, maybe 2 weeks, it depends. I want to make it pretty damn good. Thank you for watching, and thank you for travelling along the journey less travelled.